Good morning, my friends. Welcome back. So many familiar faces here. I think maybe only one or two people I don't know. So I'll introduce myself. I'm Sherry. I am the executive director here at the church. And I'm thrilled to see you all here this morning. So thank you for being here, each and every one of you. We're a small enough group we can even shout you out by name, but we'll skip that. Insight Sunday, ongoing series that we have here at the church, where we invite one artist from our community to share one work of art and to do a deep dive into that work of art. And today we are and the work of art is on view at the church for a full month. So we've had, since our opening, this beautiful work by John Pinderhughes, which is what we will be talking about today. How many people here know John? Okay, so 90% of you. But I think you will all learn many things that you didn't already know, which is one of the great joys of Insight Sunday when we go deep, is we all have a moment of discovery, usually the artist as well. John Pinderhughes was born in Washington, D.C. He grew up in Alabama, Maryland, and New Jersey, and attended Howard University. He began his career photographing the student uprisings and sit-ins of the 1960s. He moved to New York City in the late 1960s to pursue his dream. He worked for McGraw-Hill and Venture and Look magazines, where he learned from many of the prominent professionals of the day, although they did not understand that he wanted to be a pro too, sometimes assuming he was a messenger. In the early 1970s, Pinderhughes attended the WNET Film and Television Training School, which was the first major effort to help African Americans crack the television and film unions. Pinderhughes has worked as a commercial photographer in New York City for the past 50 years, operating his own full-service studios. Advertising clients, I'm not going to read all of them because there are a cajillion of them, but you can see them on our website. Major people, Con Edison, Verizon, Chase Bank, Anheuser-Busch, BMW, JCPenney, McDonald's, just to name a few. Editorial clients included Black Enterprise, Odyssey Color, Family Circle. Also, there are many. He also did album covers. Some of you are probably familiar with them. Houdini, MC Light, Aretha Franklin, Roberta Flack, Tom Brown, just to name a few. He's shown at museums all over the world, including the Studio Museum in Harlem, the Brooklyn Museum, and the Smithsonian. He has received numerous awards and grants, including a recent grant from the Open Society Foundation to document post-Katrina Gulf region. He's also the author of a cookbook, Family of the Spirit. We will not be touching on that today, although it's extremely interesting. He has been a member of the Camel Inky Workshop since the 1980s. We might touch on that today. Some of you might have seen the show at the Whitney a couple of years ago and are familiar with that history, and maybe not, and I think John will speak to it a little bit. So please help me give a warm welcome to John Pinderhughes. I'm going to sit here with you guys so that John is speaking to all of us, not just me.
Thank you.
Welcome, John.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for being here. So let's start with your life just preceding the creation of this photograph. You graduated from college.
I think the first thing I did, well, first of all, early in my college career, I went to Africa with Operation Crossroads Africa. I don't know how many of you all remember that. My wife just found out that they still exist. It was a program that took college students to Africa for work study. Work in the sense that you help the communities there with your physical labor. Learning in the sense that most young Americans knew nothing about Africans or Africa. So this was not I was doing physical labor. We were helping to build a school. We weren't telling people what to do. They were telling us what they wanted to do. We were carrying the bricks and we were carrying the wood and doing all that kind of stuff. And things happened. But there was a girl in my group that had a camera and 2 lenses. And by the end of our time there, she had asked me, could she have her camera back? And I was smitten. I knew immediately this was me. And had never taken pictures before. My mother had bought me one of these little teeny little throwaway cameras, but I went berserk, and I've never turned back.
And when you were at Howard, they didn't have a photography major.
Oh, no, they didn't even have art. So, anybody that had a camera, they were doing it totally on their own, and they had to teach themselves, which is what I was doing. And, we had little groups that would get together and we would talk about it and things like that. And that's essentially what the group that she talked about, Kamwenge, was, that a lot of African American photographers who didn't know a lot and couldn't get into some places. We had a group that we got together and we criticized each other's work, and we talked about work and how to do this and how to do that. And that's how we learned. We learned from each other. And that was very important because it bound us together. And now, of course, Kamwenge has a reputation, and we've had a couple of big shows, and but back in the day, as I said, or as you said, for example, when I worked at Look and Venture magazines, I did paste-ups and mechanicals. I didn't take pictures for them, although the art director occasionally would let me photograph something. But I would go up into the Look lab, which had all the famous photographers, coming in, and they would put all their stuff on the wall. And I'd walk in, and they'd look at me, and I'd say, "Wow, it's nice, how'd you do that? What'd you do?" And they'd look at each other, and they'd laugh, and then they'd tell me in great detail because they didn't think I understood anything. They thought I was a messenger. And I would go home and I would try it, and I would try it till I got it. And then I started slowly rising. And I was working for this magazine, that magazine. Most of my initial work was for editorial. It was for magazines. I eventually transitioned into advertising, which of course you make a hell of a lot more money. And I had my own studio, and I did very well. But it started off slowly.
So you came to New York after Howard?
I actually came back to Jersey, where I had gone to high school and grew up in Newark and Montclair. And my father was not happy about my leaving school. And we were fighting constantly. So I said, it didn't take me long to say, I better get out of here. So I did, I just moved. And I stayed with friends for a while, and then I moved in with a friend of mine's father. And that was the first place I really stayed for a long time. And anyway, many of you probably know the Lussanes, Michael Lussain. And anyway, I moved in with Frenchie. And that's when I really got started.
And do you know generally what year that was?
Late 60s.
Yeah. So by 1974, that's when, tell me how this opportunity to revisit Africa came about. Because by this time you're working as a photographer full-time, right?
Yeah. I went to Africa initially, the first time. There was an outfit, Scan Travel, which was a big Scandinavian travel outfit. And Pan Am Airlines put together a tour in Africa. And they were very interested in having a lot of African Americans come on this tour. So Black Enterprise magazine sent me, along with a writer, to document all this stuff, and they took us all these different places. And to make a long story short, at some point, I was sitting in the bar having a beer, and the guys that were running this thing came in and asked me would I be interested in leading tours for them. And I said, are you kidding? Hell yeah. And getting paid for it too. And the first year, I did about 3 tours. And then the second year, they had me booked for 4. And I asked my grandmother to go with me. And my grandmother was very special in my life. When I was born, my folks were both in school. My father was in the army. So they came home, but it was in the evening. So she basically took care of me. So she raised me, and I didn't call her grandma, I called her Gunga. And when I first started talking, I guess that was my grandma. But I called her Gunga, and she loved it, because it was different. And years later, I asked her, I said, well, come on, go to Africa with me. And she said, oh no, because my grandfather had died. They had wanted to go. In fact, they had saved up some money to take a trip to Africa, but my grandfather died. So I said, listen, Grandma, just come on and go. I may not be your husband, but I'm your grandchild. I'm your grandson. And I'm leading the tours, so let's go. She thought about it, she said, okay. I think she was about 87 at the time. So she wanted to see. The first hotel we stayed in, they had a pool and everything. And that was her first comment to me. She said, I didn't come all this way to sit by the pool. She said, I want to see some things. I want to do some things and meet some people. And one of the first photographs I took of her actually was on Goree Island. I don't know how many of you know what Goree Island is. Goree Island was the last stop as the slave ships came up the coast. They had slave forts on there where they locked the slaves up, cleaned the ships and put water on them, provision them, put the slaves back on them, and sailed over here. And of course, she went in there, and first thing she did was burst into tears. And then she would talk, in Africa, age means much more than it does here. Why? They don't live as long as we do. So older people are respected, and they're listened to. And she loved that. The older people would just come up to her and try and talk to her. And she loved it because she learned things that you don't learn from a regular tour. She learned some things because she could one of the guys would interpret for her, because a lot of the people didn't speak English, but anyway, she would talk to people, and the picture that you see there, we were in Ghana, and the guy that was from Ghana, that was my partner, Deputy Akuma, he called the mom, and he said, one weekend we gave the tourists a day off. And he said, please, I want you to come to my house for dinner with me and my family. And this is what my grandmother wanted. My grandmother was a teacher. She wanted to meet people and talk to people and learn. I was always taught as a little boy, you don't learn nothing, hearing yourself talk. My father used to tell me that constantly. I'd be getting smart, and he'd say, shut up, because you're going to learn nothing, hearing yourself talk. And she had such a wonderful time there. And the little girls, they saw it immediately. He had already talked about her to his wife. And he probably said something to the girls, but they saw how much he cared about her. And so they went right to her. And it was amazing. And she loved it. she absolutely adored it. And it was just a wonderful experience for her to be there in a household, you know, not as a tourist, but as a friend, as somebody that they cared about. And anyway, so I took the picture, but you see the little girls are right there hugging her, and they're right there with her, and they're looking right at me. And they knew that their father and I had become pretty good friends. And, you know, because sometimes little girls would be pretty shy, but they weren't shy at all. And, you know, he told them, go over and talk to her, you know. And they spoke a little bit of English, so anyway, that's the picture.
And what kind of camera did you use? Were you using on that trip?
Ooh. Probably a Nikon. Old film Nikon.
Like 35 millimeters?
35 millimeter film.
Mm-hmm. Were there other photos taken during the session? Because there's something that's it's so remarkably singular, this image. I mean, we have the actual photo here, and then the larger version on the screen.
I mean, yeah, sure. I took quite a few photographs of them, and I took a big photograph of them. We're all out front, and he's standing with the whole family. And then he got a friend of his to come over so I could get in the picture. He and I became pretty good friends. And the following year, they brought him over to New York for some special training. And instead of him staying in a hotel, he stayed with me. So that's how close we had become. You know, I mean, he taught me a lot. I could ask questions about anything, and he'd tell me. You know.
What about this photo made it one of your favorite? When we first talked about this photo, I asked the question: is there a single photograph that means a lot to you and represents, you know, a big part of your life? And you looked right behind you and said, yeah, this one right here. What was it about this one?
Well, my grandmother was getting a wish that she had, and you had to understand how close I was with that old lady. And, I mean, it was my gum. And, you know, I'll tell you a story about how, you know, when we left Washington, D.C., my father was in the service, of course, and they posted him to Tuskegee, Alabama, where they had the Tuskegee Airmen, and they also had a very, very large VA hospital there, and that's where they posted him. And, but still, they would put me on the train to go stay with Grandma. And my grandparents had a farm in Maryland. The house has burned down, but we still own the property. And it's a nice little piece, about 26 acres. And my cousins are now trying to figure out what to do with it. And we've decided that we really want the state of Maryland to buy it from us, to preserve it, so that nobody tries to build houses all over it. And you can't, because certain parts of it are wetland. But that's where I learned to fish, and to crab, and to oyster, and it was my gum who taught me all that stuff. Little old lady from Baltimore, Maryland, and she taught me all those things. You know, usually you say it's your grandfather or your father that teaches you how to fish. No, my grandmother. And you know, we used to have these little fish, and call them spot. They were small fish, even when they were grown, they were small. But she would fry those things up, and you talk about something good. with some eggs and bacon. She taught me all those things too. So she was just very, very important to who I am. It's not to say that I didn't get a lot from my parents, because I did. But she was extremely, extremely important to who I am and how I deal with things. You know, a lot of you that know me know I love to cook. I got it from her. From the time I was a little boy, she sat me in the kitchen while she started cooking. And she'd tell me, here, do this, do that. And I learned to do little things, but I loved being in there with her. And that founded my love of cooking. And I still love to cook. And I've actually done a couple of cookbooks. We had something up with you, Olivia, right? With one of the cooks.
You were in the soul food exhibition.
Yeah,
They're referring to the Amistad Institute at the Wadsworth Athenaeum, for anybody who doesn't know Olivia or John.
Well, I did a book with Harriet Cole, and it's called Coming Together. And it talks about wedding ceremonies, talks about Christmas, talks about Kwanzaa, and naming ceremonies. And we talk about how to bring your whole family together for all of these types of events and what to do. So I photographed all of these events, but the book explains to people and tells them how to do these things. A lot of people didn't know these things, and even my friend Harriet, who wrote the book with me, had never done Kwanzaa. I had to tell her about it. And we did Kwanzaa when my wife and I, when we had our two daughters, because we wanted them to bond with who they were and with the idea of family. And the idea of all these things was not that you do it by yourself, but you do it as a group. You do it as a family. And so we did that with the girls. And
Did you instill in your daughters the sense? It's interesting also that you have two daughters and that there are two girls with your grandmother here.
Mm-hmm.
Did your grandmother live to meet the girls, your girls?
Yeah, they were little. But she did.
And have you passed on to them the love of photography?
Well, I have one daughter that is a camera person. Film-wise, she's in the Cameraman's Union, and you know there's not a lot of women in the Cameraman's Union. She works out of New Orleans, where she's worked on some major, major films. In fact, I'll tell you a funny story. We were in Detroit, where Victoria is from, for one of her club meetings. I'm sitting in the bar having a beer, and these people come in, and this older guy sits next to me, and we start talking. And he's telling me, so yeah, my son is an assistant director. And he's moving, he's just coming from New Orleans. I said, oh really? I said, my daughter's a filmmaker, and she lives in New Orleans. And of course, he looks at me like, yeah, right. And so he says something to his son. His son comes over and he says, what's your daughter's name? I said, Pinderhughes. He said, oh shit, you're Sienna's father? I said, yes. And he looked at his father, he said, oh, his daughter is a fabulous camera person. And of course, the father looks at me and said, I'm sorry, you know. And she does very, very well. Like I said, because there's not a lot of women, especially not African American women, that are in the camera regime. But she is. She does very well. So I guess she got some of that from me.
Yeah. And family remained a core concept in your work, even though you, of course, became a very successful commercial photographer. Would you say so?
Yeah, but I mean, I didn't do a lot of fashion. They didn't let me do pretty girls too well. Most of my work was real people. And, that's why I did a lot of music business. They were real people. And you had to make them look good, but they were real people. And, I mean, I could tell you a whole bunch of stories about that. But,
what do you think that when you look back on your career in photography, what are the moments that mean the most of them, and is this one of them?
well, this moment was very special to me because of who it was. My grandmother, like I said, she started me in life. And for me to be able to take her in her mid-80s to Africa and fulfill one of her dreams, because it'd been a while since my grandfather had died, and I don't think she thought she'd ever get there. But she went with me, and we had a ball. And
Did you return to Africa after that trip?
yeah, I finished out my year, and then I was getting so much work at home, for which I made a lot more money, that I went back once, but it wasn't the same kind of thing.
Does anybody have questions for John at this point? Or about the photograph? Olivia?
Did you leave a copy of the photograph with your friend Donna, and what was his family's reaction to the photo? Or maybe you had other photos that you let them know?
I think I probably gave him one because, like I said, when they brought him over to New York for some training, he stayed with me, so he saw the pictures, and I'm sure I gave him one of him and his whole family out in front of his house, and with Grandma, and because he was crazy about my grandmother. Like I said, they have an affection for older folks that we need to learn. We don't have it. Everybody hears the youth generation. Young people know everything. They don't know everything. They don't know nothing yet. They haven't done anything. They certainly haven't done what the older people have done. And in Africa, that's their thing. They really have a respect for age and for knowledge that we need to learn.
Some more questions?
Hi, John.
Hi.
What is your preference for subjects, and has it changed over the years? What is your preference for photographing? What subjects, what type of photographs?
Well, most of the work that I did was people, real people, and whether it was for album covers or advertising, I'll tell you a story. I did a series of ads for, they were lingerie ads. But my daughter, I had picked up my little girl from school, and I brought her back to the studio. And of course, when you're casting, you pin the pictures up on the wall so that you and the art director can look at them and choose who you want in the ad. She didn't say anything, but when she got home, she said, "Mama, Daddy's photographing naked women again." And my wife said, "As long as they're paying him." And of course, those things, they pay you actually very well. Just like the models get paid extra. And Oh, it worked out. But that was just a funny story.
I, of course, I've seen the photograph before, but the first time I saw it, it brought a smile to my face. Because all I could think of was my grandmother, that pocketbook, and the Kleenex in the And those who, you know, are of a certain age can remember that. So it really brings back memories.
Well, if you could have seen, well, you could see her shoes.
But I didn't remember the shoes though. The pocketbook and the Kleenex.
Yeah, I mean, this was her because, you know, she was in her mid-80s, like I said, when I took her. And so she wasn't a young, hip, you know, but she was so knowledgeable and wonderful. Like I said, she taught school all her career, all her life. She was a school teacher. And so her love of kids especially was tremendous. And she just did it, and she showed the kids how much she cared about them. She really did.
We have another question.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry, and then you're next.
I can appreciate your grandmother, but I've spoken to you about one of your projects, and it had to do with New Orleans, where you spent some time in New Orleans, and I saw some of the photographs, and I'd like to know how you went about taking the photographs and getting the people that were involved, the shipbuilders and so forth. It was someone where you went very deep into what you were thinking and your photography.
First of all, I have a habit of, I go talk to people first. You know, I want to learn. You know, I'm in New Orleans, I don't know New Orleans, not very well at least. I mean, I had a friend there, Leah Chase, who owned a very fabulous and very famous restaurant. And, but these other people I didn't know. And I would talk to them first. Before, I didn't just pull out the camera and take their picture. I would ask them, can I photograph you? You know, talk to me about what you're doing. Because I think it's as important to learn as it is to snap pictures. That's the only way you learn, is to listen. It's like my father used to tell me. You know, you don't learn shit in your self-talk. That was his favorite thing. And so I learned to listen. And things you're talking about, I would ask questions and listen. And I didn't tell people what to do. They told me what they were going to do and what they do and how they did it. And I said, well, can I photograph it? And they said, yeah. So, I don't know if that answers your question. I hope so.
You did.
Questions around the room. I have one. I know we have some.
Hello, I want to go back to your grandmother. My grandmother was very special to me too. There's something about grandmas. I was wondering, after this trip, what sort of impact did her experience have when she came back to the U.S.?
Well, she was older, and like I said, she was mid-80s when she went with me. And I'll tell you a story. She had moved up to New Jersey with my parents. And I had actually gone down and rented a truck, and I brought her up. And my father died. So she moved to Boston and lived with her other son, her older son. Make a long story short, he got really sick. So they put her in a nursing home. And one evening, he called me and he said, get in your car and drive up, here's the directions, drive up and see your grandmother. I said, oh, it's kind of late. He said, please. my uncle never said please to me and his wife. He was always like my father, giving orders. And I said, oh shit. So I got in the car, and my wife went with me, and I drove up, and I went to the place, and they told me, they said, well, we don't usually let people in at night, but, you know, uncle has insisted. And they said, your grandmother is not going to speak to you. She's not going to open her eyes. And I went in, I leaned over her, and I said, Gum Gum. And she opened her eyes, and she took her hand, and she put it up on my face. And I leaned over and I kissed her. And the nurses told me, they said, oh shit. And they said, your grandmother hadn't opened her eyes in more than a week. Make a long story short, as we were driving back to New York, my grandmother died. And my uncle called me and told me thank you. He said she was waiting for you to come to say goodbye. So, that's my gum.
Thank you, that was a very moving story. Question on that?
What do you think of the new cameras now with our new cell phones? Are you photographing?
Not really. Well, I take a few pictures with my cell phone, but no, if I'm going to take a photograph, I take it with a camera.
Are you shooting with film still, or did you get a digital?
No, I have digital.
So
You know, there was a certain part of my career where you couldn't shoot film and they weren't accepting it.
right,
So if you didn't shoot digital, you weren't going to get the job.
right, especially the magazine world. They
Yeah.
want the right away to be turned around.
Or the advertising too. By that time, I was shooting more advertising than magazines. So.
Did they have you develop your own film when you were shooting, when you shot film?
When I shot film, yeah, you had to develop your own film.
And then
Well, no, you can take it to a lab.
Okay.
You can take it to a lab.
More questions?
It's lovely stories. I'm just wondering, I really appreciate photography, that it captures people and, you know, conveys all the complexity or something. I'm just wondering, was there any occasion when you snapped a picture, maybe it was published or something, and then it led to some contact later with people recognize their picture, or you know, did people get in touch with you afterwards, or?
Well, there have been circumstances where they didn't know that I was doing a job, but I don't really shoot and snap a picture. People always know that I'm taking their photograph. You know, and I usually, if it's a job, I tell them. I don't do that. Because most of it, if it's a job, you have to ask them to sign a release, giving you permission to use the photograph. You can't just take your picture and then go sell it. You just can't do that. The only place you can do that is anything that's open to public view is photographable. And there's nothing you can do about it. If you're out in the street, but if you're here in the church, no, because you're in a private area. So nobody can photograph you and just use it. But if you're walking down the street in town, yes, they can do that. But that was not my thing. That was really not my thing. Most of the circumstances and situations I photographed, I was learning something. In addition to photographing it, I was learning something. And so I really wanted to talk to people and learn, well, how did you do this? What are you doing? You know? And interesting, you know, when you photograph people, and you have to learn how to kind of put them at ease. And you put them at ease by asking them questions, by talking to them. by being straight up with them. If I'm going to use this for something, I tell them I'm going to ask you to sign a release, and this is what it's for. I don't just snap it and steal it. You really can't do that, because you can get sued big time.
Did you ever make a relationship with somebody after you took their photograph years later, or did a relationship ever emerge from a photograph that you took?
Oh, many times, yes. Many times, yeah. Yeah.
I have a question.
We have one here. I'll make my way back. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. I really loved what you shared and the devotion that you have with your grandmother. I grew up around photographs because my father worked as a photo retoucher
Mm-hmm.
on 42nd Street Camercraft. It was years ago. So whatever house we lived in, there was always a dark room downstairs. And he also, then when we moved to Long Island, he started a photographic laboratory. In other words, gearing to professionals who needed a lab. So I just think that, I know that the racism and the struggle that he experienced in that regard, and I think that you experienced a lot as well, and our society doesn't tend to value artists or black folks, so I feel that there's more of a struggle that you had, and I want to appreciate that, because I know what my father had too. Thank you.
Well, I can only tell you what my father told me when I told him I was going to leave school and move back north and become a photographer. Well, I can't say all the things he said here, but he was not happy. And but then years later, we go into we went out to have a drink, and woman behind the thing said, "Doc, look at this," and she pulled out, I forget whether it was a Essence, Black Enterprise, or something magazine. I had a big spread in there. My father said, "Oh shit, you did that?" I said, "Yeah, of course I did it." "How much they pay you?" I said, "They paid me pretty well." So he said, "Well, okay, all right." So after that, he was a little bit more, open to what I was doing. And then the more he saw my name, the more he accepted it. I'm sure he wished that I had finished college, and years later I wish I had finished too, but I was into what I knew what I wanted to do, and I went for it.
Question here.
Hello, John.
Hey.
The
How you doing,
question
Ray?
I'm going to ask is whether you or someone else took a picture, which appears on my Facebook page. I'm going to preface this by saying my wife and I have 4 of your photographs. One is of my father, my 2 brothers, and myself at the rock in Sand Harbor Beach. And at the time you were doing beach photographs, you took a picture of me with my cap backward and in beach gear. And of course I signed up my rights to that. And Valerie bought 2 of your photographs, I think 2 years ago at the Creatives. One, okay, I think it's up along Northwest Creek. But this photograph I have of you, you're in a lineup in this picture I call my brother and his friends. You're in there. Harry Anderson is in there. Tom Edwards is in there. My brother
That was before I was a photographer.
Well, and I was just saying, did you set up the camera and then get back into position, or did someone else that you know take that picture?
I would have to see the
You guys
picture to
did
know
that.
when it
You
was,
guys were
because
all-
you gotta remember something, you know,
you're all in-
Tommy Edwards,
Yeah.
that's how I got to Santa Barbara, Tommy Edwards.
So you guys were lined up, you were in your primes.
How old, we were older,
Well, you know, Herb died at 50.
then I might have set up the camera and
Yeah.
had somebody press the shutter for us, so.
But, yeah, so maybe you set it up and went off automatically, or someone else took the picture. It's a great picture, I have to say. You guys look great, you know, all successful.
Well, you have to remember, we were friends since we were little boys, so, and I'll tell this story a little bit. Victoria and I had, we were gonna buy a house up on Martha's Vineyard. Because I used to go up there too. And, at any rate, my uncle said to me, he said, "What the hell is wrong with you, man? Why are you gonna buy you a house over here? First of all, it's too expensive." And he said, "Besides, if you really want to come up here, you can come stay here in my house." Okay. And Victoria and I think the next summer we rented out here first. We rented for a couple of years. And then we bought a piece of property and then we built a house. But I reconnected with a whole bunch of people that I knew from my childhood. Because I used to come out with Tommy Edwards, and Tommy and Lynn, my cousin Mary Helen. Do you remember Mary Helen? At any rate, it worked out for the best. Because the couple we were going to buy the house with, they eventually broke up and it was nasty. So that would have messed us up big time. Because we lost all our money. I'm glad my uncle said something to me.
We have another question here.
Mm-hmm.
In recent years, you have enjoyed beautiful landscape photography and nature photography. What brought on that transition, and do you get the same satisfaction from doing those?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You gotta remember something. I grew up by the water, and so I've always done landscapes and stuff, but I couldn't make any money at it. But now I can. You might remember that I was on the board of the Nature Conservancy for about 15 years out here. And so I've been to all the places out here. A lot of places that most people don't know about. Because some of it's off limits. Because they're saving it, they're preserving it. And, you know, a lot of people don't do what they should do when they go on land. But yeah, I've been involved with nature all my life. But I made my living shooting people. That was my specialty. But one thing you have said, you said something about it where I have a whole series of what I call my Sag Harbor beach portraits that I have photographed the people on the beach. I mean, and there's a lot of them. I mean, there's hundreds of them. And I'm slowly working on doing a book of my community and all the people on the beach and you know, from the time they were kids. You know, I got pictures of my girls, they were little. And I got pictures of them when they're grown.
Hi, John.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good, how are you? I just wanted to say that photography and pictures have always been my favorite art form. It just always has.
A lot of it came from the fact that my father was a photographer from the time we were little, such that there are 6 girls, and the oldest girl, she used to cry after a while because he was always taking her picture. He took pictures of us all the time, and what it ends up as, this picture here reminds me of, I have a sister now who every Christmas she shows pictures with the music. It is such a fantastic experience to have pictures that someone has taken of you as you're growing and the things in your life. It just brings so much back to you. And that's one of the reasons that I loved it. He also built a room to develop the pictures downstairs. We used to love it. It was just like a fantastic thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then this thing of taking pictures of people, James Van Der Zee became one of my, so I just wanted to say thank you to you for carrying it on because I love it.
Thank you. Did you know James Van Der Zee?
Yeah. She says how, yeah, I think James Van Der Zee died in the 70s. Did you know James Van Der Zee?
I know James.
Yeah, he's amazing.
And everybody talks about his wife, his young wife. She married him to take care of him. She was actually, how many of you remember the Cowboys? She was actually Jimmy Calvin's first wife. Yeah. She was Jimmy's first wife. Yes. Donna Van Der Zee was Jimmy's wife. I know, I watched him say yes.
Getting some very deep local history and
But
gossip.
they broke up, and she originally started working with Van Der Zee to help him, because he was an old man. A lot of people look at her and say, oh, she took advantage. No, it was the other way around. She did what she did to help him.
Did he ever come out here to Sag Harbor?
I don't think I ever saw him in Sag Harbor. You know, when they were married, he wasn't really moving around, jumping around.
Mm-hmm.
He was pretty old.
Yeah, I'm sure. Speaking of, I'm just actually curious, there is this just in reflecting on so other people's questions, a legacy of African American photographers that James Van Der Zee is a very big part of, Roy DeCarava is a very big part of, and people in our community now, like yourself, Donna Marie Barnes, continuing that legacy. How have doors opened for young photographers, African American photographers today? Because it seems like it appears that the list is now very, very expansive.
One of the things I think that opened the door were things like Essence Magazine, Black Enterprise Magazine. They wanted to use Black photographers. And so the few of us that were there got a lot of work, a lot of experience, and then other people started using us, and the advertising agencies started using us. And so we just grew. And the group you're talking about, Komondi, which I guess I still belong to, but you know, my time with that stuff is pretty much past. I'm concentrating now on my artwork. Like you said, I photograph on the beach all the time. I call my you know, and they're beautiful. I love it out here. I love the landscape, and also the people on the beach. You know, I've got beautiful photographs of a lot of you on the beach, and I got lovely things of your mother, Anna, on the beach, and you too. I got one that I love. You sitting there in your chair reading, and looking at me like, what are you doing?
I just really want to acknowledge the fact that you're really a national treasure. and we're looking at living history when we're talking with you. I guess I always knew that you were important, and this goes back to Grace Congregation Church, which my mother-in-law attended, as did you. And you took a picture of Megan's mother there. That is just a beautiful portrait. It also, it comes to mind when because I'm a member of the African American Museum in DC, and I was just thumbing through, and there were photographs that says, photographed by John Pinderhughes. So you have been locked in for history, so we're looking at living history. I just want to thank you for that. I think there's things that we just don't know, and I know we long to know more, and you're special. Thank you.
Well, when I started in this, there weren't many of us. And there weren't many of us that were really, really shooting. They were shooting important things. There were very few of us. As I said, you know, when I go up to, I worked for Venture Magazine, I'd go up to Look Labs. They would send me up there and there'd be all these famous photographers. And they thought I was a messenger. How can I be a photographer? I'm black. They thought I was a messenger. But fortunately, when I asked them a question, they would answer it, and they would answer it in such detail because they didn't think I understood what they were saying. But I got it. And I kept growing. And I didn't let it bother me. I kept growing, and I kept working. And gradually, I was working for everybody. You know, I shoot ads for BMW, and you know, for everybody. I did pretty well. I did pretty well. I mean, my wife and I have a lovely wife. I got two beautiful daughters. We got a lovely house out here. All you beautiful friends. What more can I ask for? Now, I know a lot of you don't know a lot of this that I've said today, but that's okay. Because I don't walk around talking about myself. That's not what I do. We talk about other things. Anyway.
I have one last question. Time for one more, Lori.
So you have this legacy of an 87-year-old aspiring and doing something totally different in her 87th year of life. So as you look forward 10 years out, what is that grand ambition for yourself?
I just want to keep working. You know, now I'm doing a lot of my stuff is out here now. I don't know how many of you have seen my landscapes, but we're getting ready to shop them in this book. And they're actually going to be part of a major book that is being worked on about me and my career, and my life. And a lot of it is going to be commercial stuff, but a lot of it is going to be my personal stuff. And it's going to be a big I also want to do the beach portraits because, you know, I meet all you all on the beach and we talk, we stop and we talk, and it's real. It's you know, nothing, you know, I'm not trying to be somebody special, I'm just being your neighbor. And you all let me photograph you that way. And it shows. And it's, you know, almost all the pictures, nobody's putting on, they're just being themselves. And that's the beauty of it. And a lot of times they're with, this is work. Even that's work. The nude was for Essence magazine.
Okay, well, I said one, but here's one last.
Are there 3 other photographers that you look up to or emulate or respect for
artists whose work I respect. I don't emulate anybody. I let it come through my head, or my mind, and my eye. I really don't try to emulate anybody. You know, like I said, I'll ask a question, well, how'd you do that? Because it's a technique. I said, I haven't seen that before. What'd you do? And if I use it, I'm going to apply it to what I see, the way I see things. I'm not going to try and reproduce what you did. That's a whole interesting series of portraits there. All these people, all these men, of course you all know who that is, but all those men have to do with organizations that made the effort to help black men do better.
Well, I want to say that, and also I think some people in the audience observed it, the reason why we invited John to speak here today is because I quite agree that John is a very important artist of national stature who happens to also be a living part of the history of Sag Harbor. And so thank you very much, John, for your work and for being with us today.
You're more than welcome.